Welcome to this episode of the 94twenty podcast, where we talk about the music that we love and the industry that we tolerate.
Charlie got high on cocaine and whiskey to get out of his one-horse town. He packed up his blues and his violent youth, and he spun his wheels round and around. He drove into the sea, too much of a good thing. Well, Charlie had promised when he was 16 he could play the guitar like a young Springsteen. And he never looked hard for a girl on his arm. He could tell a few jokes but never did any harm. For him life was easy, too much of a good thing. Something about those Friday nights made his blood run hot, hot, all right. He drank like he knew that he was going to die. His promise soon dissolved, and with his old friends he soon lost touch. Where do you go when you peak when you're young? Charlie got high on cocaine and whiskey to get out of his one-horse town. He packed up his blues and his violent youth, and he spun his wheels round and around. He drove into the sea, too much of a good thing.
Hey everyone, that was Charlie's Song by the Sam C. Jones, a artist that actually found us through Instagram. And we actually had him on, Carl, because he sounds very like vibey and folky. Like he's got a really good sound about him.
What I dig about this song, is it's funny. I just read this book, a biography on Dylan, right? And the whole thing, the first I guess 100 pages talks about Dylan in like 60, 61 in the Village, and how he was basically at the forefront of the Village folk scene, with this guy Dave Van Ronk, I think was one of the guys, and Pete Seeger and Peter Paul and Mary and Phil Oakes and all these guys. I even think the guy from the Mamas and Papas, John Phillips, was part of that, and they all have this kind of way about him, and it's very similar to what Charlie's song sounds like, the way Sam sounds. It's really, so it's just odd and cool to hear someone because he's a young guy. I think he's in his 20s, right? He looks like a young guy. Yeah, I don't know exactly how old he is, but
no, he is young. He's like 22 maybe, and don't quote me on that.
Yeah, so it's funny. It's cool to see a young guy, embodying like this circa 1960 folk vibe. It's just very cool. It sounds, even the recording sounds kind of circa 61, so that's what I like about it. It's a cool vibe.
Ah, awesome. Well, hey, Greg, too. Sorry we just dove in a little bit. We didn't even get to say hi to you.
How's everybody doing?
You don't got to say hi to Greg. We know he's there.
You know what? I mean, I have. I'm making no promises this episode. I've been in the middle of a hellish work week, and I don't know what I might say. So we'll wing it.
Do you want to elaborate?
No, I don't really want to elaborate. The last time I went on a rant, it was like
we ended up recording 3 other times.
We recorded 3 other times, plus the fact when we did the edited version of the rant, I think we achieved the least number of downloads per episode that we've had in 94twenty's existence. So I am great. I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to the episode.
Does Carl need to have any sound effects ready in case you do go off on a rant?
Well,
Oh, I feel like Carl should always just have his sound effects ready
He
at
might be
the.
boycotting the fact that I've
So
taken
folk music.
folk
That-
you.
so folk music, that's an interesting thing now. Because people a lot of people can, well, here we go. Back in the day, a lot of people, if you know what that is, people who have heard our podcast know what that means. But they confuse folk music with country music. When I was growing up, we had basically rock. It was like in New York, it was rock, and then or then it was pop rock. But then and that was the only genres until like the '70s, and disco came in and kind of changed it a bit. And then there was pop, art, then Motown started happening around. But then basically rock and Motown, and that was it. But then like country and folk were all these genres that were just, who cares about that nonsense? That's how I grew up believing, not until I got older did I realize the quality in a lot of this stuff. And not only the quality in it, but where a lot of rock and great rock writers, and it all stems from there. That's where it kind of started.
Well, I think that, in the late 60s, I mean, of course, you had the genres were changing quickly, as was the the kind of the mood and the intellect in the country. And you had people like, all the female artists like Joni Mitchell and who was
that was much later. That was 70, 71. I'm talking 60s.
Well, yeah,
61.
right. I mean, that's there was a folk faction in the 60s.
Oh yeah, so you're saying So
what I'm saying is that artists like Joan Baez, delivering straight up folk music to a whole generation. And of course, Dylan was part of that too. And he actually created.
Well, basically, according to the book, she was already established at the time.
Right.
She basically, gave him a leg up.
Exactly.
And was one of the reasons why because she thought he was great.
And for the time, it was kind of a perfect storm because these artists, people like Baez, had discovered early on in the late 50s and 60s that folk music had a lot to say. It was very opinionated, and you could create protest basically masked inside a folk song.
Sure.
And it just caught fire, particularly with her performance at Woodstock, and then you had people like kind of looking to the folksters in order to find these hidden meanings.
Well, they didn't have the term back then, but that's where I think that's where the singer songwriter kind of began.
Exactly.
Even though they didn't call him that. It didn't really happen until like the late 60s with Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell started happening then, and Neil Young, where then it emerged the singer-songwriter, which in essence was just a folk singer with a bit of a rock sensibility because of what happened in the last few years, in the music, So it's kind of a mesh of it all.
Yeah.
And a little rock.
Right. And it sounds very foreign today. I mean, people hear it and they think, my word, how could the hipsters of the day, how could that younger generation be digging that, because it does sound kind of straight and kind of, I don't know what the term is.
But that's the joke. The joke of it is, I remember, because I was even too young for that stuff. Right. That was even before my time, but that was like avant-garde beatnik,
right,
totally left nonsense. I mean, you want a folk singer in the village? Are you one of those crazy guys who smoke marijuana and it was crazy. They were like looked down upon, they were a step past the Beat generation.
Yep.
The Ginsberg and the Kerouac and all that kind of stuff.
Hoffman and all those characters, right? So yeah, I mean, I've always actually enjoyed most of it. There was a group back in the 50s and 60s called the Limelighters. And I don't know.
They play with Earl. What's his name?
No. The Limelighters were.
They play with Earl Gregory. You're talking about?
The Limelighters were very famous, and they had a famous kind of lead vocalist. His name was Glenn Yarborough, and I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast before.
I know that name.
But Glenn Yarborough had this absolutely extraordinary voice, and I have a very strange story that I could relate about me bringing Glenn Yarborough out of retirement in the 90s to sing on this record that Gary Burke and I produced called A Celebration of the American Farm.
Well, Greg,
What?
tell that story.
Well, I don't know, because I'd love to be able to at some point feature the music, but long and short of it was that Glenn Yarborough had this successful career in the Limelighters, and he'd actually had a couple of hit singles in the 60s. He did a song called Don't Let the Rain Fall Down. I don't know if you remember that song, but Glenn was, he was kind of a legend in folk circles for many, many, many years. And he essentially kind of retired to a sailboat and sailed the world for many years. And when we were working on this project, A Celebration of the American Farm, there was an old track on Limelighters record called Far Side of the Hill. And so I was always mesmerized by the song because he's got such an amazing voice. He had not been in the industry or sung anything in probably 20 years, 25 years. And because Gary Burke is from the Woodstock area, and because he knew a lot of those old folksters, he actually came up with a contact, and we had the idea to recut Far Side of the Hill because it was contextual to the farm theme. And
Right.
we had the idea that we were going to bring Glenn Yarborough out of retirement, and we were going to
And you did.
and we did. I contacted his daughter, and she said, I don't know if we can get him to do it, but it sounds like a great project, and I'll speak with him.
How old was you at the time?
I guess he was in his maybe late 60s, early 70s, but
And could he? Does he still have the voice? Can he still do it?
that's the cool part of the story. So we get into the studio after this wrangling and trying to get him there and paying for him to be
Right,
there, all this
logistics,
stuff,
right.
and Gary knew who he was, and I knew who he was, and all the studio musicians knew who he was. So he walks into the studio and sits on a stool. He's very unassuming and a super nice guy. And we're sitting in the control room, and the band is running through the tune. And Gary says to me, "You did figure out whether or not he still had a voice, right?" And like we're getting ready to roll tape, right? And so I said,
anyone check that?
I said, no, Gary, actually, I didn't. I was just so excited to get him here. I'm sure he'll do fine. And I have to tell you guys, I think maybe what we can do is put the track up at 94twenty.com. We'll have it streaming from someplace so that it's all authorized. But it was the most magical thing I'd ever experienced in the studio.
It was great.
It was unbelievable. And when it's a weird track because he whistles at the beginning. And so at the beginning of the track, he starts whistling, and I just get goosebumps, and then he sings, and it was just extraordinary. He did it in one take. And after we stopped the tape, he said, I haven't sung that in 30 or 40 years. He says, is that going to be okay? And we were all dumbfounded in the studio, in the control room.
That's a weird thing, like it's funny you bring that up because not all artists retain their voice. Like perfect example, I love the Beatles, but McCartney can't sing anymore. And he's out there still doing it, and he can't hit those notes, and he's lost all. It's more just seeing the legendary McCartney.
Yep.
But it's funny, just the other day, I just happened to catch a YouTube video of, I think a year or so ago, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Awards, where Joan Jett was inducted, right? So in Joan Jett, it brings, she covered Crimson and Clover by Tommy James, right? And all of a sudden she goes, and ladies and gentlemen, Tommy James. And so she brings him out. He's like 75. He's really heavy now with I hate to say it, he still has long hair and he has this weird comb over. So he looks kind of weird.
Those are in style now.
He still had the voice. He starts singing,
man,
and it's like,
love it.
He nailed it. I'm going, holy cow, he still has the voice. So some guys can, for some reason, they retain the voice. Others don't. So it's a weird toss. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
If I ever hit the lottery, and I doubt that I will, but if I ever do, one of the things,
Greg, do you ever play the lottery?
One of the projects that I have on the drawing board is a gated community of aged rock stars. So I'm going to live next door to all my
God.
heroes.
Why don't you start like a home?
Exactly.
Like you can put
Exactly.
like a nursing home or for the old rockers.
Yeah.
old rockers who lost their
How
fortune.
cool would it
all these,
be to be walking out to get the morning paper and it's like, hey Tommy,
no, man, I hate this. I hate to say it, but no offense to these people, but there's this thing every once in a while you see this Time Life PBS special where they have all the greatest hits of the
Right,
60s.
right.
And they have all these bands. So they bring out the Zombies, right? With Time of the Season and all these old dudes. Oh my God. Then they bring out, the Herman's Hermits. And then they bring out
Well, now
Paul
wait
Revere and the
now.
Raiders.
Peter Noon's still got it. He can still sing.
Yeah, but still, but it's like why does everybody get fat? You got to get old, but do you have to get fat? I wouldn't have come. I said, no, I'm not coming on stage now. I'd want to keep it frozen.
I think that happens to a lot of people, actually.
You want to play another one of Sam's songs?
Yeah, let's play another one.
I think this is his single, right? He just released
This is
this?
his latest single that he released with another artist that he's featuring, Hannah Jane Kyle. And the single is Pour Me Another.
Got off the job around 7. Head to the bar before 8. Back broken, tired, and not a friend to conspire. It's just me and my thoughts and my drink. Suddenly something comes to me. I should be at my best friend's wedding. I bet she looks pretty, and I bet he's as happy as a fella is ever gonna be. So I said, pour me another to the nameless bartender right here. Let's drink to the bride and the groom and the day and the year. By now they're twisting and shouting, the cake has been eaten by the guests. And I'm sitting here pouting at a lonely old dive bar out west. Well, I got a few pictures, but it ain't the same as really being there. I wish I chose different instead of always being so scared.
Well, it's hard to come by,
but good love is rarer even still. Those two, they've got it, and I wish them good luck and goodwill. So I said, pour me another to the nameless bartender right here. Let's drink to the bride and the groom and the day and the year. By now they're twisting and shouting, the cake has been eaten by the guests. And I'm sitting here pouting at a lonely old dive bar out west.
That was kind of cool. Again, I hear the guy sing. he brings me back to a place that I've never been. I feel like because after reading I just read this book literally like last week. I finished it. So and then I just saw the Dylan documentary of No Direction Home, which showed it. And now after hearing him sing, he just it's like that. I feel that's where he brings me. So I love that someone can do that. So it's
Well, and
very
that's
cool.
that's
Very
what I
cool.
like about him is his voice. It's different than what you're hearing like mainstream now, and it does have this very smooth, not quality to it, but it's not overdone. Like you can't,
No, it's just what
yeah,
it is, and he's who he is, and I love that. To me, if it's
yeah.
authentic to me,
He
so
actually
that's what I
he
like
brought me
about it.
back to the fact that I just finished binge watching Yellowstone with my husband, and I'm like, that song would have been any of his songs really probably would have done very well sync wise there.
What's
It's
Yellowstone?
this Paramount Network, I think, but it's a show where it's all about a ranch in Montana.
Yogi Bear
No,
and Boo
no,
Boo.
it's about a ranch in Montana
Hey Yogi, hey Boo Boo.
that this family has owned for like 3 or 4 generations at this point. And it's about them like fighting for the land and how like people or businesses are coming in to try and take it, or like the Indian reservations trying to steal it from them. And it's just really interesting. And like they feature not just like the shady business dealings, but also like what a rancher's life is like and what these people do each day.
Is it Kevin Costner?
Kevin Costner. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I was very floored with their finale for this season. And my husband and I are like, why? We have to wait until 2021 now to watch what happens.
Yeah, I hate to be. I've gotten so spoiled that I hate even watching shows that haven't finished because I don't want to. There's a few shows that I've
On
watched.
demand.
And I've
You're an
watched
on-demand
all
guy, right?
all the seasons, like 4 seasons, and now I got to wait for the next season. I want the show to be done. When it's done, then I can watch the complete. But then I hate how they end. They always end badly. They always end stupid.
Well, especially for shows that have like jumped the shark already, and like they should have ended like 2 or 3 seasons ago.
But I have to. I know this episode's all over the place, but what I think the best ending, and not even the best ending, but the best choice of ending music was Breaking Bad. Did you guys familiar with Breaking
Yes.
Bad?
I was
yeah.
not a fan, but
Well, anyway, I thought it was great. And basically, though, if you're not
what track did
just
they
a quick
use?
synopsis. Well, what happened is that he was basically a meth dealer, a meth
Right, of
scientist,
course.
and he made a meth lab, and he made this stuff called Blue.
He was
right?
terminally ill,
And-
so that
and-
gave him
Right. So at the
yeah.
very end, they kill him, and they played Badfinger, Baby Blue, and it's just like just if you hear the song, the first 3 lines of the song were perfect. It was boom.
Okay, so let
It
me
was
ask
just-
an insider question: was it a re-record, or did they use the original?
No,
track?
no,
Okay,
it was
cool.
it was a needle. It was a needle drop.
cool.
It was like they paid the money, man. They used the real track.
I have noticed that since Netflix and Hulu and all these people have all these hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal to produce things on their own, I have noticed that the music budgets for sync licensing have skyrocketed. These people will pay a lot of money to use authentic music.
But
and
again,
That's been
Greg,
good for
this is
the
what
industry.
I feel. What I feel has happened though, it doesn't cost what it used to cost.
Right,
Nowadays
right.
because these artists like they're not buying their records anyway. So Zeppelin, like 25, 30 years ago, would never have done a Cadillac commercial. Come on, it's ridiculous. It was so uncool. But now, because and maybe if you did even get them to consider it, it would have been $1 million plus. Just to license their tune.
It's just
Nowadays-
fascinating to me, like the economy of scale in.
Yeah, but now they'll do $50,000 because what it'll do is it'll just ramp up their iTunes sales or streams because now who's this band? Oh, this is great. Zeppelin. Oh. So because now your catalog is always out there all the time, so it behooves you to just let it be promoted that way through whatever channel you can. So that's why it is. I think so. That's why commercials to me. That's why I had a career like a little bit in jingles. It's over. There's no need for jingles anymore. Why get us? It used to be where the big thing in jingles was, I want a song that sounds like the Cars.
Right.
Now they just get the Cars.
Right.
So
When the budgets dictate that, yeah. So and
Right, or else when they can't, they go and get cheesy
And I think
music.
it's an acknowledgement of, I mean, the people that are making these shows, I think they are acknowledging the idea that, and we've talked about this in other episodes, where, music is an integral part of these productions. So I think that the producers are starting to come around to the idea that, yeah, we're going to need a bigger budget because, quite frankly, this music enhances our portrayal of the story. So
But again, yes and no. I don't know about you, but I don't care if I know the music. But if it's cool music, that's all that matters to me. And like I'm Shazamming 5 times a movie sometimes. Like who's that? Who's that? Because I hear all these because all these indie artists are getting these licenses because they're cheap and they sound great and they're cool, and like so you don't need, unless you specifically need these big name old acts like the movie Almost Famous and stuff. You had to license those tunes. But for a lot of this new stuff, there are so many young acts out there. Probably you out there listening right now. Your music, you don't have a record deal yet, but you have some great tracks. You should be licensing your music. That's a way to get your career started and to get yourself some notoriety.
I totally agree. And we can also take just a little time and kind of clue our audience, our massive podcast audience, into the situation that we're currently in. We are stewards of copyright here. We want to make sure that the music that's featured inside 9420 is licensed, fully licensed. And I don't think listeners understand how difficult that is and what kind of struggle we're enduring in order to make these things happen correctly, and so that the artists will, and the writers, the rights holders, if you will be compensated,
will be protected.
And it's
right.
It's really been it's part of that hellish work week that I've had. The idea that we shouldn't have to work so hard in order to put the correct licensing proposition in front of people.
Well, it's not so much work, Greg. I think it's just education. I think people should understand.
Yeah.
So I think
right.
we have to educate. Once people understand it and are educated and versed in it, then they know what it's about. They go, oh wow, you're there to help me, But because we're in this world where everybody thinks to try to get them or take advantage of them, everyone's weary, especially artists, because there's so many horror stories.
Well, and I will say, to give props to our featured artist this week, Sam C. Jones. He is probably one of the very few that we are sending out the license to that immediately was thankful that we had this opportunity for him and signed it in a heartbeat, because he understood not just the fact of getting featured on the podcast, but what that means to be within that directory and being able to have it all copyrighted and legally done. So kudos to Sam.
And just so listeners understand, I mean, if you have a favorite podcast and you're listening to feature commercial stuff that you're hearing on the radio, likely that has not been properly licensed. And so, it's a real struggle, but we do it for the love of the music and the business that we
tolerate.
Well, and you don't even know the catchphrase.
I was setting you guys up.
Nicole, why do we have him?
I was setting you guys up. I wrote the damn catchphrase. I knew what it was.
Well, I'm going to set everyone up for the next episode, because I think that one is going to shed a little bit more light for artists to understand, and for everyone who is listening to also understand a little bit more in depth about what we're doing with the podcast and the partnerships that we've created, because hopefully we'll be able to have Doug and his answers on and kind of get into a conversation around that.
Yeah, Doug Reed, who created the podcastmusic.com licensing proposition. Hopefully we'll have him on to answer a few questions. I hope that it won't bore people. What I would love...
No, I want to bore everybody.
I'll tell you, this is what I would love to happen. There is a viable artist submission program so that people can license their music into podcasts correctly. So if you've got a friend, or if you're a listener and you're enjoying the podcast and you'd like to hear that friend featured, there is a process. We've built it, and we work towards bringing you great music that you might not have otherwise heard every
Yeah, so
single
people
week.
So people out there listening, they should realize we are visionaries right here now. This is like
Well,
we are
I think that's
pioneers.
clear. I think that's
We are
I think
pioneers.
with our mass audience, I think it's clear that we're visionary.
We are visionary pioneers trying to just, from now on, I'm not even going to call you Greg anymore. I think we should change your name to Stuart.
I'm a steward of copy, not Stewart.
He's a steward.
Let me ask you guys something, and I don't know if this will probably be equally as boring as the last 10 or 15 minutes, but so how many episodes have we done? We have done probably what?
We've
15,
done 7. This is 17.
18.
Yeah,
We've
done 18 episodes. What do you think of this? Are we just pissing in the wind here, or what do you think of the experience?
I enjoy doing it, and this is what I feel. It's funny. Because of the podcast stuff, I'm listening to more podcasts because I've been, walking more just to get exercise to get out of here. So I listen to podcasts when I walk. I just heard this podcast about, again, another digression about the show, The Makings of Sex in the City.
Is this from the Origins podcast that you're obsessed with?
Right. Yeah. Right. And they talked about, and they were saying how, and to me, that's kind of an iconic show on HBO. That was before HBO was a series. It was like really cutting edge. When they were doing it, they thought it was garbage. No one liked it. They thought, who wants to hear about women doing stuff? Like, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't find their audience until a year and a half in. It's like, so what I'm saying is you never know what you're doing. So basically, I think, are we pissing in the wind? Maybe. Who knows? Or maybe not. This might be the worst thing that ever happened to podcasts ever. And they go, where these guys get off even wasting, the internet space. or they might go, these guys are cool and in their way of doing things, they stumble on topics. Because I think we're pretty rounded in our topics.
I think what I was trying to get at is that the podcast will likely live or die with our ability to feature this music. So
and I will say though, like, it'll live or die with the ability to feature this music. Artists are starting to understand a little bit more, and we're getting a quicker turnaround time when we find really interesting artists to feature. But I enjoy doing it. I look forward to talking to you all weekly.
I do too.
I mean, granted, we talk way more than weekly, but and I enjoy searching and finding artists and being able to give them an opportunity to not just be on a podcast, but maybe get featured in a different way.
You love just not being answered and then not answering your emails. Yeah. And you love just saying they're going to do something and never do it. You love that. Well, oh yeah, I'll sign it, and then never sign it. And then you call them again, and then dead air. Oh, that was today?
I'm just waiting on the Earl Gregory episode, and I'll be good for another 15 or 16.
And no question of the week. No question of the week.
No question of the week. No.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Let's all enjoy the silence of no question of the week music.
Except we did say it, so technically Carl can play it if he wants.
I wish I could play this backwards because it was, we.
The question of the week. Why is there no question of the week?
Yeah. So send your questions in.
Send your friends over that you think you would want us to hear.
And also we have, and if you like this podcast, tell them about our new little feature on the website. Nicole.
Oh, that's right. So you have the ability to support our podcast now. So if you are so generous and want to, we're still going to record these, but if you want to donate and help support us monetarily, you can go and click on the donate now button and kind of make your donation, whether it be one time or a recurring monthly one, and get some.
Yeah, it could be $1 a month, $3 a month.
Yeah, and we're going to start dripping out some exclusive content to our supporters over the next couple of weeks as we figure out and structure kind of what the monthly subscriptions look like. But you do now have the ability to tell us how much you love us by giving us some money.
And full disclosure, a percentage of your donation will go towards purchase of a lottery ticket so we can have that old rock and roller gated community.
Rockabilly Island.
And also, because you guys don't realize, even though these podcasts are like 35 to 45 minutes long, we record these for 6 hours. So they got really edited. So there's a lot of outtakes.
You're getting the
So there's
best.
like
You're getting the best. Only the best.
There's 4 hours and 30 minutes of just cursing and arguing and bickering and like, no, you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot.
So we're going to try to get to 20. Is that what I'm hearing? We're going to try to get to 20 podcasts.
No, try. We're almost at 20. We've got the next one next week with Doug, and then our 20th episode will be our flashback feature where we bring back some of the music that we've really liked to highlight over the last 20 episodes.
I'm going to try to find the Earl Gregory for that.
Okay. I can't wait.
So hey, regardless, we're still 45 minutes in. So whatever we do, we seem to be able to fill up something.
Well, I've actually raised my spirits a bit, so
good.
I'm good with this.
All right.
Well, we'll
do you want
see.
me to
talk us, get us out of this.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the 9420 podcast. For all of the show notes, go to the website 94twenty.com. That is the numbers 94 and the letters TWENTY.com. And remember, you can now support us in a financial means as well. So click that donate button and give over whatever type of donation you want. We'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.